That night, I thought I was just going downstairs for a glass of water, but what happened in that kitchen changed everything. The way she looked at me, touched me, it wasn't motherly, and I didn't want it to be. It all started when Dad remarried and I came home for holiday. I hadn't even closed the front door before I heard her voice. "Oh, you're finally here." A blur of blonde and silk rushed toward me before I could process much more than the smell of cinnamon and something floral. Then she was hugging me, not just a polite welcome home hug, but the kind that lingers, soft arms around my shoulders, her cheek pressing against mine a second too long. "You must be exhausted. Come in, come in. Let me get your bags." I blinked as she darted past me toward the car before I could even open my mouth. So, that was her, Dad's new wife, my stepmom. And she looked nothing like I imagined. Younger than I expected, maybe early 30s at most, with long honey blonde hair and a figure that didn't match the whole mom thing at all. Her face was pretty, but not in that fake magazine way, more like soft skin, flushed cheeks, and lips that curved up even when she wasn't smiling. I felt overdressed in my hoodie and jeans. She wore a peach-colored robe that tied loosely at her waist, revealing smooth legs and the top of a delicate camisole underneath. "Your dad's working late, again," she said with a half smile once we got inside. "But he made me promise not to let you lift a finger tonight. Are you hungry? I made lemon pasta, or I could reheat the casserole, or..." "I'm fine," I cut in, trying not to sound rude. "You don't have to do all that." She gave me this look, warm, wide-eyed, slightly tilted, like she was studying me. "But I want to." I hadn't expected this. I thought she'd be distant, cold, maybe, someone trying to play stepmom without overstepping, but instead, she moved around me like we already shared a rhythm, touching my shoulder when she walked by, brushing a hair off my face as if she'd done it 100 times. "Bathroom's down the hall, same as you remember," she said lightly. I added a few candles. Lavender's good for sleep. She smelled like lavender, too. It wasn't until I was alone in my room, unpacking slowly, that the confusion started to creep in. I hadn't seen my dad in months. Things had been tense before I left for college, and we weren't exactly calling each other every weekend. So when he texted that he'd remarried, I wasn't shocked. But this woman who moved like she belonged in a romantic drama, who hugged like she knew what your body needed, something felt strange. Not wrong, just strange. And at that time, I didn't know this was the beginning of something forbidden. Dinner was quiet. She didn't pressure me to talk, but I caught her watching me between bites. Not in a judgmental way, more like curious. "You look like him, you know," she said after a while. "Who?" "Your dad. The eyes, mostly, but your mouth, that's all yours." I looked down at my plate, unsure how to respond to that. Compliments weren't weird, but the way she said it, slowly, softly, felt layered, like she wasn't just noticing, like she was feeling it. Later, while I was brushing my teeth, I saw her reflection in the hallway mirror. She paused outside my door, holding a folded blanket, wearing that same robe. Her eyes met mine in the mirror, and neither of us looked away. "I put a heating pad on your bed," she said finally. "Thought your back might be sore from the drive." "Thanks," I muttered, but she didn't leave right away. She lingered, standing there, fingers curling around the blanket. "Let me know if you can't sleep. I'm usually up late." Then she walked away, robe swishing at her thighs, her bare feet silent on the hallway wood. It was almost midnight when I went down to the kitchen. I couldn't sleep, not with the sheets smelling like roses and her words replaying in my head. The house was dark except for the under-cabinet lighting that glowed soft yellow. I patted in, expecting silence, only to find her there, leaning against the counter, holding a mug with both hands. Her robe was shorter now, or maybe she'd pulled it tighter. Either way, it clung to her hips, revealing more leg than I remembered. "You couldn't sleep either?" she asked without surprise. She handed me a mug, tea already steeped, chamomile, no caffeine. I accepted it without speaking. Her fingers brushed mine as she passed it over. Her eyes didn't leave me. There was a long pause. Then she said quietly, "I didn't know how nervous I'd be, meeting you. That surprised me. Why would you be nervous? You're important to your dad, she said, looking down into her tea. And you're you. I didn't know what that meant. You have this energy, she added, her voice barely above a whisper. It fills the room, even when you're quiet. I turned toward the counter, not sure if I should say thank you or run. She was standing close now, not touching, but close enough that I felt the heat from her skin, and it's just... She exhaled. You're not what I expected either. My heart kicked in my chest. What did you expect? She looked up at me, her expression unreadable. Someone younger, smaller, less aware. The air between us shifted, dense and unspeakable. I forced a breath out and turned to the window. Well, I guess we both have to adjust. She stepped back. I suppose we do. I started up the stairs before she could say anything else, my tea untouched in my hand. I didn't hear her follow, but I felt her eyes on my back the entire way. Back in my room, I closed the door, leaned against it, and tried to shake the tension off. Maybe she was just trying too hard. Maybe I was overthinking everything. Maybe this was normal, just a new stepmom trying to bond. But then again, what kind of mom touched your cheek with both hands when she barely knew you? What kind of mom watched your mouth while you spoke? Like she was imagining how it tasted. Lying in bed, I stared up at the ceiling and felt a strange warmth between my ribs, a kind of confusion that pulsed quietly, like the beat of something I didn't want to name yet. Maybe she was trying to be my mom, but maybe she was trying to be something else. It started happening more often after that first night. The closeness, the touches, the moments that weren't exactly wrong, but didn't feel normal either. She always had a reason. That was the thing, a reason to brush against me, to rest her hand a little longer on my arm, or to tuck a loose strand of hair behind my ear like it had been bothering her more than it bothered me. Every interaction was coated in innocence on the surface, but something lingered underneath, something neither of us named. One morning, I came downstairs expecting to find her in the kitchen. Instead, I stopped short at the entrance to the living room. There she was, alone on a yoga mat in the center of the rug, bathed in early sunlight. Her hair was tied up high, little wisps sticking to her cheeks, and her body moved slowly, stretching, arching, folding. She wore a tight black sports bra and matching leggings that hugged her curves without apology. She glanced over her shoulder when she noticed me. "Morning," she said, her voice soft, a little breath from exertion. "You want to join me?" I blinked. "I don't really do yoga." "Good," she replied with a lazy smile. "Means you'll need help stretching." There was a pause between us, just a second too long, before I muttered something about coffee and backed into the kitchen. But I could still see her from there, one leg high in the air, arms stretching above her head like some slow-moving dancer. Her eyes flicked toward me more than once. I pretended not to notice. Later that afternoon, I found one of my bras in the laundry basket she kept near her bedroom. It was one of my nicer ones, lace-trimmed, soft lavender, definitely not something I'd mix up by mistake. I stood there for a second, staring at it, half convinced I'd somehow imagined it. Then she walked in. "Oh," she said lightly, noticing the bra in my hands. "That must have gotten mixed in when I folded the towels earlier. Sorry." I didn't say anything. She stepped closer, too close, but didn't reach for it. Just looked at me, her head tilted a little, eyes amused. "I can toss it back in your room if you want," she offered. "No," I replied quickly, setting it down on the counter. "It's fine, I've got it." She gave me a small, unreadable smile and walked away without another word. My hands were still warm where they'd held the fabric. That evening, I was reading on the couch when she came and sat behind me, legs tucked under her, the soft scent of her body lotion reaching me before her fingers did. "You look tense," she said, almost a whisper. Before I could even answer, her hands were on my shoulders, warm, firm, practiced. She started slowly, pressing her thumbs into the tight muscles near my neck. It should have felt maternal, comforting. But her touch was too deliberate, too slow, and her fingers kept drifting lower, skimming the edges of my collar, brushing against bare skin as if testing where the line was and how far I'd let her cross it. "You hold a lot of stress here," she murmured, leaning in so close I could feel her breath on my cheek. "I'm fine," I replied too quickly, but I didn't pull away. I couldn't, because some part of me wanted to lean back into her hands to let them wander just a little more. My mind screamed at me to stand up, to say something, do something, but instead I stayed still, eyes fluttering closed, skin prickling under her fingertips. Later, when I was alone, I caught my reflection in the hallway mirror and looked away almost instantly, because I knew what that expression meant: guilt, confusion, want, and I hated that I wanted it. I avoided mirrors for the rest of the day. It rained the next afternoon. Not just a drizzle, a full, steady downpour that wrapped the house in gray and quiet. The windows fogged and thunder rumbled softly in the distance. I curled up on the couch under a blanket, phone in hand, trying not to think too hard. She came in and out of the room several times before she finally settled beside me. She brought a mug of tea and wore a thin cardigan that slipped off one shoulder as she sat. She didn't say anything for a long time, just sat close, too close. "Cold?" she asked eventually. "A little." She smiled, pulled at the edge of the blanket and spread it over both of us without asking. Her arm slipped around my shoulder naturally, like it had always belonged there. I told myself not to overreact. It was just a blanket, just a movie, just rain. But I could feel the shape of her body pressed against mine, the slow rise and fall of her chest, the way her thumb stroked the fabric near my elbow absent-mindedly, or maybe not so absent-mindedly. The movie played. I didn't remember any of it. Sometime after that, I fell asleep. When I woke up, it was still raining. The house was quiet, heavy with that same charged stillness that comes just before something breaks. I was still on the couch, but now my head was resting on her chest, my body half curled against hers. Her arm was wrapped around me, holding me there, and her hand wasn't moving, but it had been. I could feel the warmth of her palm through my shirt, feel her breathing, shallow, fast, uneven. She wasn't asleep. I kept my eyes closed, heartbeat racing, as I realized she was awake, holding me, aware of where I was, and not pulling away. Minutes passed like that, quiet, suspended. Her fingers didn't twitch. Her breath stayed shaky. She let me lie there, my head rising and falling gently with every breath she took. I didn't move. Neither did she. I told myself it was just another blurred moment, but I knew better. Something was shifting, yet I didn't know what it was. Dad left early Thursday morning for a 3-day business trip, something to do with a logistics expo in Denver. He kissed her goodbye at the door, gave me a distracted wave over his shoulder, and disappeared into his Uber without much ceremony. That left just the two of us. The house felt bigger without him in it, quieter. The air is different, like the walls themselves were watching. She didn't say much that morning, only made coffee. Hummed softly to herself while barefoot in the kitchen, her robe hanging loose around her waist. The fabric parted briefly when she reached for something on the top shelf, revealing the subtle slope of her hip. No bra, no shorts underneath, just skin, pale, smooth, bare. I told myself I shouldn't have noticed. I told myself it wasn't intentional, but then she looked at me, caught me looking, and smiled without a word. Later that day, I found her curled on the couch with a glass of wine, wearing that same robe, still no sign of anything underneath. One leg was draped over the armrest, the slit in the fabric falling just far enough to be dangerous. I sat across from her, pretending to scroll on my phone, but my eyes kept drifting back. She sipped her wine, watching me over the rim of the glass. Then out of nowhere, she said, "You're awfully quiet today." I swallowed. Just tired. She tilted her head slightly. "From what?" I didn't answer. The silence sat between us for a beat too long. Finally, I exhaled, voice dry. "Are you trying to mess with my head or something?" She blinked, then gave a soft laugh, low, knowing. "What makes you say that?" I raised an eyebrow. "You seriously don't know?" "Maybe I do," she said, swirling the wine lazily. "But it's more fun hearing you say it." She didn't deny it. That was the part that made something twist inside me. Not the robe, not the teasing smile, not even the brush of her thigh when she shifted positions. Just the fact that she knew, and wasn't pretending anymore. That evening, the sun dipped early, casting long shadows across the hall as I went looking for her. I'd heard the water running in the bathroom and assumed she was showering. I was halfway through the door before I realized she wasn't. She was in the bathtub, steam curling into the air, bubbles floating on the surface of the water, her bare shoulders glowing in the soft light. She didn't flinch, didn't cover herself, didn't reach for a towel. She just looked at me, dead in the eyes, and smiled. "You forgot to knock," she said calmly. I stood frozen, hands still on the doorknob. "I thought you were... sorry." "Don't be." Her voice lowered a little. "Want to join?" My breath caught in my throat. She wasn't laughing. She wasn't teasing. She was serious. Or maybe she wasn't. Maybe this was just another level of the game. I swallowed hard. I should probably... not. She let her head fall back against the edge of the tub, eyes still on mine. "Suit yourself." I backed out of the room slowly, heart pounding, and closed the door behind me with shaking hands. That night, I couldn't sleep. Every time I closed my eyes, I saw her. Glowing in the candlelight, her legs stretched beneath the water, her mouth parted just slightly like she'd been expecting me to say yes. I tossed in bed for hours before I finally got up, restless, needing air. The hallway was dark, save for the moonlight pouring in from the skylight. Her door was cracked open just enough to catch my attention. I don't know what I expected when I pushed it open, but I wasn't expecting to find her sitting on the edge of the bed, hair still damp, wearing one of Dad's old t-shirts that hung too low over her thighs. The room smelled like lavender and warm skin. She looked up when she heard the door creak, but she didn't ask why I was there. Didn't speak at all. I took a step inside. She stayed where she was, knees pressed together, hands folded loosely in her lap. I didn't say anything either. Not at first. I just stood in the soft light watching her, wondering what was happening to me, what was happening to us. Then, slowly, I walked closer, heart thudding loud enough to hear. She looked up at me, expression unreadable. My fingers moved without thinking, rising to brush a loose strand of hair from her face. Her eyes fluttered slightly, and I let my fingertips rest against her cheek. She leaned into my touch. For the first time, there was no game, no teasing, just heat, tension, breath. She tilted her face toward mine, closer, closer, until I could feel her lips just a breath from mine. Then she stopped. Her hand came up, gently cupping the back of my neck. Her lips brushed my ear. "We can't," she whispered, breath trembling. "Not yet." I pulled back an inch, confused. "Why?" Her eyes searched mine. "Because if we do, there's no undoing it." We stood there in silence, faces inches apart, breathing each other in. She was right. One more step, and we wouldn't be able to turn back. And still, neither of us moved. It started with silence, a shared stillness that neither of us dared break. The night air had that heavy, lingering quiet to it, the kind that made everything feel slower, more intimate, the kind that whispered rather than spoke. We sat across from each other in the living room, a bottle of wine between us. She'd lit a single candle on the coffee table, and low instrumental music played softly from the Bluetooth speaker tucked behind the bookshelves. Something classical, maybe a piano score. I couldn't tell anymore. The notes melted into the moment too easily. She wore a thin, pale tank top and loose flannel sleep pants. Her hair was tied up, but a few strands fell around her face, catching the candlelight like copper thread. She hadn't bothered with a bra. I hadn't dared look directly, but I'd felt every inch of her presence like a heat against my skin. I was in one of Dad's old hoodies, legs tucked beneath me, fingers curled loosely around a glass. I hadn't drunk much, maybe a sip or two, but my head still felt light, a little too aware, too present. We hadn't spoken in 20 minutes, not since she'd said, "Just one glass," and turned the music on, and yet the air between us buzzed. Every so often she'd glance up at me, not a stare, just a look, and I'd feel it, like a feather tracing the back of my neck, every single time. When she shifted on the couch, letting her leg fall sideways, I caught the shape of her hip through the fabric. My breath stuttered. Her eyes flicked to mine, held. Neither of us looked away. "I shouldn't," she said suddenly, almost to herself. But she didn't finish. I didn't ask her to. Instead, I reached for the wine bottle and poured another inch into her glass. She stared at the red swirl for a moment before accepting it with a quiet, "Thanks." A pause. Then I said, barely above a whisper, "Are you scared?" Her eyes lifted slowly, brows slightly furrowed. "Of what?" I gave a small shrug. "Whatever this is." She didn't answer, but she didn't break the stare either. And then it happened. Her fingers reached across the couch cushion, soft, tentative, fingertips grazing mine. A touch that didn't mean anything, and everything. I didn't pull away. She curled her hand around mine, her thumb brushing slowly over the back of my knuckles. It was delicate, almost reverent. My throat felt tight. The sound of my own heartbeat filled my ears. Then, without thinking, I leaned forward, just slightly. She mirrored me. Her face was inches from mine, her breath warm, laced with wine and something sweeter. Her lips parted like she was going to say something, but she didn't speak. She kissed me. It was slow, hesitant, the kind of kiss that made the world stop. Her lips were soft, impossibly soft, brushing against mine like she was afraid I'd disappear. My fingers tightened around hers, my free hand rising to her cheek, where her skin was warm and trembling beneath my palm. She deepened it, not urgently, but deliberately, like she was memorizing every second. I felt her sigh into my mouth, the tiniest sound, and everything in me ignited. The kiss went on forever, and still, it wasn't enough. When she pulled back at last, she didn't open her eyes right away. Her forehead rested against mine, and her breathing came shallow, uneven. Her voice was barely audible. "Just keep it quiet, okay?" The words slipped out like a prayer, a warning, a confession. I nodded, but her eyes had that flicker of guilt in them now, the kind that curled in the corners like smoke. She pulled me toward her again, not to kiss me this time, but to guide me into her arms. We lay there tangled on the couch, the candle flickering low, our bodies pressed together like two puzzle pieces that had always known each other's shape. Her fingers moved up the back of my hoodie, beneath the hem of my shirt. Not fast, not greedy, just exploring, mapping, like she needed to feel that I was real. My hand slid under her tank top, resting over her rib cage, where her heart thundered against my palm. We weren't speaking, just breathing. My lips found her collarbone, her neck, the hollow beneath her jaw. She gasped, not loudly, but it cracked something open in both of us. She rolled to face me fully, hands cradling my face as she kissed me again, slower this time, but with more weight, like she wanted to stay in that moment and never leave it. I felt her thigh slip between mine, her knee nudged gently upward, my breath caught, and still, we didn't cross that last line. It was as if we both knew the threshold was there and we both wanted it, but neither dared step over it, not yet. Her hand slid under my shirt, tracing the curve of my waist, fingers splayed across my lower back. I arched against her touch, mouth pressed to the corner of hers, skin burning. We moved together in rhythm, hips just barely grazing, bodies trembling. It was slow, electric, like we were testing the edge of something dangerous. I buried my face in her shoulder, biting back a sound I didn't recognize. Her hand stilled. Then, after a long pause, she exhaled shakily and pulled me in closer, hugging me tight against her chest. "Okay," she whispered again. "That's enough." I didn't want to move. Didn't want the moment to end. But she kissed my forehead and held me, and slowly we settled. I ended up in my own bed that night. I don't remember when I left the couch, only that my skin still tingled from where she touched me, that my lips felt swollen and warm, that the scent of her, lavender, wine, and something uniquely her, lingered all over me. I lay there for hours with my fingers curled over my own mouth, afraid I'd lose the taste of her if I breathed too hard. I didn't sleep, not really, and when morning came, everything felt different. The light was brighter than it should have been. Too clean, too exposing. I crept down the stairs, half afraid she wouldn't be there at all, but she was. Standing at the counter in the kitchen, her hair tied up messily, wrapped in her robe. She didn't look up when I entered, just reached for a second mug and poured coffee into it. When she handed it to me, her hand trembled slightly, barely noticeable, but I saw it. She didn't say good morning, she didn't smile, and she didn't meet my eyes. But the silence between us was louder than anything either of us could have said. I tried to act normal, I really did. I laughed at her dumb jokes. I washed the mugs like I always did. I nodded when she talked about dinner, about errands, about the damn basil plant on the windowsill that kept wilting no matter how often she turned it toward the sun. But none of it felt real. She wouldn't look at me. Not really. Not since that night. Every time our eyes met, she dropped hers a second too fast. Every brush of her hand against mine was accidental now. Every glance was careful, measured, like we were strangers again, or worse, like she was trying to rewind time. The silence was loud. It sat between us during breakfast, during reruns, during those awful in-between hours where I wanted so badly to say something but didn't know how, until I couldn't take it anymore. It was late, the house quiet except for the hum of the fridge and the soft clink of her spoon tapping against a yogurt cup. She was leaning against the counter, still dressed in those too thin pajamas she wore when she thought no one would notice. I stood in the doorway, arms crossed over my chest, and said it, just like that. Tell me this wasn't just a one-time thing. She froze, didn't speak, didn't blink, just stood there with her back rigid and her hands trembling ever so slightly. I stepped closer. Say something, I whispered. She turned, eyes wide and wounded, but there was something else there too. Guilt, regret, fear. We shouldn't have, she said finally. I wasn't thinking clearly. It got out of hand. My chest caved inward. So that's it? My voice cracked. You're going to pretend none of it mattered, that I didn't matter? She swallowed hard, setting the spoon down too fast, too loud. It's not that simple. No, I snapped. It never is it? Not for you. I moved past her, pacing in the kitchen, every nerve in my body buzzing. You kissed me. You touched me. You whispered to me. You said to keep it quiet like it was something we could live with, and now what? You get to bury it and go back to being my stepmom who hums while vacuuming and makes apple pie? Her face crumpled. She tried to speak, failed, then took a shaky breath. I didn't plan any of this, she whispered. I didn't expect to feel the way I feel. I stopped pacing, turned slowly toward her. What way? I asked, barely breathing. She looked at me then, really looked. I think I'm falling in love with you, she said, voice raw, ruined. I don't know what that makes me or what this is, but I haven't been able to sleep since that night. I haven't stopped thinking about how you looked at me, how it felt to hold you. Tears stung the back of my eyes, but I blinked them away. Then stop running, I said. Stop pretending. And that's when it broke. She moved toward me in a sudden rush, and I met her halfway, hands tangling in her hair as our mouths crashed together. Not soft this time, not slow. It was messy, gasping, unrestrained. She kissed me like she needed it to breathe. We stumbled back against the wall, her fingers tugging at my hoodie, mine slipping beneath her top. Skin on skin. Warmth and friction and the unmistakable hunger of something that had been waiting far too long. We didn't speak as we moved to the bedroom, just desperate touches and shallow breaths. She pulled off her shirt slowly, eyes locked to mine. I followed suit, my heart pounding as I stepped out of my clothes piece by piece, until nothing was left to hide behind. Then we were in the sheets, tangled and bare, bodies pressed together in a heat that felt almost holy. Her hands explored me like a map she'd always wanted to memorize. Every inch of skin she touched lit a fire beneath it. Every kiss was deep, anchoring, and impossibly tender, and when I touched her, truly touched her, she moaned against my neck like she'd never been touched like that before. It wasn't about lust. It wasn't even about rebellion anymore. It was needed. It was all the quiet aching we'd swallowed, all the longing we'd buried, spilling over into something beautiful and broken and real. When we finally collapsed together, damp and breathless, her arms wrapped around me tightly, I curled into her, cheek against her chest, listening to the thud of her heart. Neither of us said a word for a long time, and then, as the air cooled and our bodies slowed, I whispered, "We're not going back to how things were. Are we? She didn't answer, but she didn't let go either. I don't know what will happen next. All I know is we crossed a line we can't uncross, and now we're standing on the edge of something neither of us expected. Would you turn back? Or keep going, knowing the risk? Let me know in the comments, because honestly, I'm not sure if this is love or a mistake we'll never come back from.